Introduction. In the 6th volume of the Second World War, Sir Winston Churchill has described the scene at Potsdam in July 1945, when, from a little distance, he watched President Truman tell Marshal Stalin of the great event that was to take place in the following month. The latest triumph of Western genius, the masterpiece that was destined so profoundly to affect the history of the world. The Marshal showed polite interest, the mildest of curiosity that barely rose above the level of indifference, and no comprehension whatever. Sir Winston was sure, he tells us, that he had no idea of the significance of what he was being told. If he had had the slightest idea of the revolution in world affairs which was in progress, his reactions would have been obvious, but his face remained gay and genial. According to President Truman, he did not even ask a single question. What Marshal Stalin was being told about was not, though as a matter of mere chronological chance it could have been, the imminent publication of a little book called Animal Farm, which appeared on the bookstalls in the same month in which the atomic bomb hit Hiroshima and Nagasaki. No doubt the Marshal's reaction would have been much the same if it had been, and perhaps, though this is still a very much longer shot, his reaction would have been just as inappropriate. It was nothing but an arbitrary coincidence that brought these two events together in August 1945, though they took almost equally long to prepare. George Orwell's whole life was spent in preparation of Animal Farm, and the text itself bears the dates November 1943, February 1944, months when the Manhattan Project was also moving towards a climax. But it was a coincidence that must have given Orwell a sad, ironic satisfaction. For there are those who have argued that, looked at in a wider historical context, the first atomic bombs were aimed at a quite different political target which had nothing to do with the Japanese War. And there are others who have convinced themselves that Animal Farm was also aimed at a political target, the same one. Orwell himself might perhaps have admitted to agreeing with both interpretations, but he would also surely have argued that this personal enemy was no single individual or government. It was the system of the world capable of producing and using atomic bombs. In this case, the coincidence of August 1945 was even more remarkable. Disciples of Professor Toynbee, yet unborn, may well point to it as one of history's most striking conjunctions of challenge and response. These are early days to claim that the pen is mightier than the atomic bomb, but Orwell would not have flinched from the confrontation. It is not much more than 100 years since Bulwer Lytton discovered for us that the pen is mightier than the sword, already then an obsolescent weapon, and even that only beneath the rule of men entirely great, a sufficiently rare state of affairs. In the last 100 years enough has happened to justify us in believing that the pen's response to the challenge of force is at least not ludicrous and hopeless. Indeed, it is perhaps the one serious hope we have. Certainly it would not have seemed ludicrous to Sir Winston Churchill to have spoken in the context of 1945 of a book instead of a bomb, for the pen has always been the first weapon in his armoury, and with it he won the most crucial victory in the history of our race, in the battle that was joined with the words, "We shall defend our island whatever the cost may be." Sir Winston had the advantage, it is true, though it is also true that he furnished that advantage himself, of proving Bulwer's epigram in the exact conditions required by Bulwer's qualifying line. George Orwell had come to doubt before he died, at any rate when he wrote 1984, whether those conditions would ever be seen on earth again. But there is no doubt whatever that it was a purpose of the same kind that Orwell was setting himself to achieve by his writings, and especially when he wrote Animal Farm. If the book itself had left any doubt of the matter, Orwell dispelled it in an article which he called Why I Write, a few years later. Every line of serious work that I have written since 1936 has been written, directly or indirectly, against totalitarianism. Animal Farm was the first book in which I tried, with full consciousness of what I was doing, to fuse political purpose and artistic purpose into one whole. In the criticisms of some of his contemporaries, which Orwell wrote even earlier than Animal Farm, his recurrent theme was their failure to protest against the world they lived in. This is the whole burden of his longest and most serious piece of literary criticism, written in 1940 on Henry Miller, and he called it Inside the Whale, to illustrate this same point that Miller had failed in his duty to protest, had performed the essential Jonah act of allowing himself to be swallowed, remaining passive, accepting. In the same essay he criticized a line of Mr. Auden's poem, Spain. The conscious acceptance of guilt in the necessary